Hi.
Hello again.
Last time we were doing Ray Franz, he had been talking about the distinction, the artificial distinction that the Watchtower makes between sacred service and the rest of your life.
Which is supposed to be to the glory of God.
That's right. So Ray continues by saying, the whole thrust of the 1980 Watchtower material is to place service to God in a separate category of life's activities. It attempts to differentiate between service and sacred service to God, restricting the latter to acts of a very distinctive, unusual nature. It is true that the particular term under discussion, latruo, is used in Scripture only with reference to service to God or to a god or gods. For pagans, such service involved things done in temples, in special buildings, special rites, and special offerings to their gods. For the Jewish people, it was usually applied to acts performed in fulfillment of the law covenant, including ceremonies, sacrifices, holy festivals, priestly service. All this is evident. The notable thing about Christianity, however, is precisely the fact that service to God is so vastly broader, so all-pervasive, not limited to activities performed in certain buildings or in prescribed forms, affecting only part of one's life.
The writer of the 1980 Watchtower articles is right in saying that to the Jews, sacred service was always related to worship in obedience to the law covenant. He is wrong in claiming that this rules out its application to basic essential acts of human living. While obedience to the law covenant did include some out-of-the-ordinary activities, distinctive from everyday activities, obedience to that law covenant also included much that was part of the daily life of Israelites. The law covenant did not merely prescribe periodic animal sacrifices, fastings, holy festivals, and ceremonies, but called as well for the daily exercise of fairness, justice, righteousness, honesty, and compassion in their everyday dealings with one another. Its laws called for kindness toward not only fellow Israelites, but also slaves, foreign residents, even for consideration to animals and birds. The Israelites commonly minimized these factors, however, in favor of those of a ceremonial and distinctively religious aspect, taking pride in these as proof of their devotion to God rather than in the daily aspects of life. The Watchtower presentation follows a comparable course, shows the same mistaken viewpoint. And then Ray cites a bunch of scriptures, which we'll put in the description, from the book of Leviticus and the book of Deuteronomy. We'll pick to read over the examples he gives of the difference between the Jewish law code and the parallel between the Jewish way of looking at responsibility before God and how the Watchtower prioritizes.
Right.
So the first one is Leviticus 25. This is the passage about the Jubilee system, starting at verse 35 to 43.
That's right. And in case your brother grows poor, and so he is financially weak alongside you, you must also sustain him. As an alien resident and a settler, he must keep alive with you. Do not take interest and usury from him, but you must be in fear of your God, and your brother must keep alive with you. You must not give him your money on interest, and you must not give your food out on usury. I am Jehovah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan, to prove myself your God. And in case your brother grows poor alongside you, and he has to sell himself to you, you must not use him as a worker in slavish service. He should prove to be with you like a hired laborer, like a settler. He should serve with you till the Jubilee year. And he must go out from you, he and his sons with him, and he must return to his family, and he should return to to the possession of his forefathers. For they are my slaves, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They must not sell themselves the way a slave is sold. You must not tread down upon him with tyranny, and you must be in fear of your God.
We've said it before, but it's worth saying again. The Israelites, as far as we know, never kept the Jubilee. Can you see why?
Yeah.
Obviously here, this is not going to suit the centers of power in Israel or anywhere else. You have to give the land back to the people who own it. That is the family that owns it, not the tribe even, every 50 years. So if a fellow Israelite falls into poverty, you are to not benefit by that. You are to loan him, hire him as a servant slave for the period that he needs to be in this situation. You are not to take advantage of his poverty. And you're because you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and you know how it feels to be a slave. You are not to treat even foreign slaves in the way you were treated by the Egyptians.
Yeah. So if you always have it in your mind that you are God's slaves, that's going to change your perspective, and it's going to make you want to be loving to these people like God is loving to you. He rescued them out of Egypt and treated them in such a kind and loving way. Wouldn't they want to do that to anyone who's serving with them? But just this unselfish attitude of caring for your brother. If he's in trouble, you take him in, you take care of him.
This is extended family. This is not just yours, as we tend to think of it. These are people connected to you by tribe or clan anyway, and you're not to take advantage. And this is not the way we think, but it all starts with a certain view of where you are with God. You are His servant, and so if you treat people like God treats His people.
So they're not new principles. You know, we sometimes divide it like the Old Testament was different than the New Testament. But the same principles are there in the Old Testament as to being selfless, living a selfless life, being a real brother to people in your community and beyond. You're supposed to be the example.
So if they couldn't keep the Jubilee, or let's put it this way, they weren't willing to keep the Jubilee. It was asking too much of human beings to not profit from someone else's poverty. And by the way, the church exemplified this principle throughout, right until relatively modern times. Through the Middle Ages, the idea that usury
was wrong.
The fact that usury only became permissible with the rise of the nation state in the last 500-600 years, to the point where you could now profit. The whole system of debt that we now have is the legalization of profiting from the misery of others.
Now it just seems normal, and it seems like how else could you do it? That's our...
The normalization of debt, that's happened since I was a boy. And here's another passage. This is seemingly less demanding than the Jubilee regulation that we just read. This is Deuteronomy 15:7-11. If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the seventh year, the year of release is near. That's alluding to the fact that every 7 years, debts were canceled.
Yeah.
So you might think an unworthy thought, ESV says, the seventh year, the year of release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all the work you do and in all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. Give freely. And that line, which of course is quoted by Christ himself, there will always be the poor among you. It's not a justification for ignoring the poor. In the setting here, it's obviously your responsibility to take care
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
poor.
It's a totally different way of thinking of things. But I think the other thing is that the Israelites, like us, like the ritual part, which looks religious, but these things, which are very practical and everyday living, we tend to minimize them and not think about them, not concentrate on them.
Yeah. So,
Whereas the prophets keep on saying that was their problem. And now the Watchtower is looking at the way Israel did things and copying it.
exactly. I think that's Ray's major point here, that the JWs, like Israel of old, prioritize the distinctive rituals and don't prioritize the divine responsibilities that God obviously really cares about here.
God is interested in our whole self, in everything that we do in life. He wants to make us into good people. He's not interested in the ritual stuff.
Not to say there shouldn't be rituals. Rituals have their place, but they're not to replace religion,
Yeah. And we, it's, what
as they did in
it?
paganism, by the way.
How do you say that word?
Compartmentalize?
Yeah. That's what all of us tend to do.
We're going to link to Walter Brueggemann's discussion, a video we shot on Naboth's vineyard, how that little story epitomizes the problem in Israel. That power corrupts, and you have a king of Israel, pretty early in Israel's history of kingship, who transgresses against these very commandments that are in the law, and thinks it's his right because, of course, he is the king. And also to Walter Rauschenbusch's discussion of the Jubilee.